Not hearing my voice. Do you hear my voice now? Do you hear my voice now? That'd be a bummer if I was talking and nothing got through. I think I have it set so that the microphone audio is on. At-bats with runners in scoring position is another stat that I'm really looking at. Jose Reyes, oh my God, look at that. Ted Williams, 111 with runners in scoring position with maxed out clutch. That just doesn't make sense to me. That's going to turn around. That is an aberration. Cool. Looks like my voice is back. Una voce poco fa. That's right. Una voce poco fa. One of the hardest songs to sing that I've ever encountered, and it's like the height of vocal shred, and it's so baller. Don't sleep on Gioacchino Rossini. I tell you, that bel canto stuff is as shreddy as any Jose Triani. Especially when you got a whole orchestra shredding through some of those lines. It's fun. Check out the whole Barber of Seville if you want some deep cuts. Pete Hill, 300 with runners in scoring position. He's really getting it done. Piazza, 297, which is higher than his season average, but still not super clutch. Yeah, nobody just really stepping up in the clutch for the Angels. That's really a disappointment. So while Piazza seems to be emerging as a potential MVP candidate, they don't seem to be checking that box, because you would really like to see Ted Williams or Mookie Betts be the one leading the charge there, but that is not the case. On the pitching side of the ball, we'll go and look at the guy. There's just one guy who hasn't gotten much work. That's John Hiller, and he's gotten 9.2 innings. So this bullpen has actually seen a lot more utilization than a lot of the bullpens that we've seen, which, for better or worse, I don't know. We will see how the numbers play out. Hiller does have a 1.86 ERA and a 0.93 WHIP in those 9.2 innings with 10 Ks. So he's doing great and could see even more work out of the pen. But for the guys taking the bulk of the work, it's Cy Young leading the way with 45 innings pitched. He has a 3-4 record to show for it, though. Max Scherzer seems to be the tough loser here. 1 win, 3 losses, even though he's pitched to some pretty good peripherals. 3.86 ERA is pretty darn good for the Legends League. Carl Hubble had been one of the real bright spots for the Angels and looked to be emerging as that potential ace for the staff, but he has fallen off. You can see that icicle next to his name, indicating he is on a cold streak. He's only struck out 37 in his 44 innings, and his ERA has gone up to 4.47. That 1.22 WHIP is low enough that could suggest that Hubble could start to rock again, and he isn't getting shelled like the icicle suggests. J.R. Richard has looked really impressive when we've seen him on the live stream. He has 41 1/3 innings and has struck out 37. ERA just under 4. WHIP trending towards 1.5, which isn't great, but he is 3-1. And then Shohei Ohtani has been the guy who has really surprised me. There are some starts where he's just gotten blown up, but for the most part, Shohei has actually been a really reliable starter for this team and was not the guy who I would have pegged to step forward for this roster. I doubt he's going to fill that ace role that the Angels really need somebody to step forward into, but he's going to be a super reliable middle-of-the-rotation guy who can actually be reliable in the playoffs if he keeps throwing like he has been so far. Jeff Reardon taking 3 losses out of the bullpen isn't great, but the peripherals aren't bad. We'll see if we can figure out what's up with that. Closer Sean Doolittle has 11 saves in 14 innings of work and 1 loss. He has blown only 1 save, so that's pretty good. 11 for 12 in his save opportunities. Looks like the starting rotation has done a pretty darn good job of limiting the walks while bringing the Ks. Scherzer with 54 Ks in 44.1 innings, 3.86 ERA, 1.42 WHIP. I expect better things for Scherzer moving forward here. Cy Young with a 5 ERA and a 1.58 WHIP is not exactly encouraging, especially when he is your biggest innings eater. A big thing I've been looking at with all these rosters is looking at how many quality starts per total number of starts. So the fact that he's gone out there 7 times and has only delivered 2 quality starts suggests that he really may be not the guy to take this ace role for the Angels. Scherzer, on the other hand, 4 out of his 7 starts is the same as J.R. Richard and Shohei Ohtani. So more than half the time they're going out there and giving the Angels a real chance to win. Carl Hubble, only 3 quality starts in his 7 starts. You know, that's just one bad outing less than the other guys. I don't see that as being too much of a problem. And again, Hubble's 1.22 WHIP is the lowest of the starting rotation. So I still have a hope that Hubble will emerge as a true ace by the time we get to the playoff stretch. For the bullpen, Greg Olson, pitching to a 1.4 ERA and a 0.94 whip in 25 innings with 28 Ks, is fantastic. One of the better bullpen arms we've seen. Yeah, stellar work. This might be the best all-around bullpen that we've looked at yet. I think it might be the best all-around bullpen performance-wise in the Legends League so far. Blown saves from Horner, 2 from Reardon, 1 from Doolittle, 1 from Hiller. That's not exactly encouraging, but a lot of holds. 6 from Olsen, 6 from Horner, 3 from Reardon, 5 from Hiller. Looking at the hits, runs, earned runs, and home runs allowed stats, Cy Young allowing 10 home runs. And he's got that 95 home run per 9. That's the home run prevention stat. So he should be elite at preventing home runs, but something ain't working out, which tells me that there's something going on with his pitch repertoire. He's got a 95-mile-an-hour four-seamer, and then he's got 4 slow pitches. He's got the curve, the sweeping curve, the changeup, the screwball, and all of those are coming in at 80 miles an hour or slower. I wonder if it's the screwball or the curve or the sweeping curve, one of those bendy things that's just getting hammered for home runs. I wouldn't be too surprised if that is the case. Oh, don't want to sort by hit by pitch. Want to sort by innings pitched. There we go. Okie dokie. 1.4 win above replacement already accrued by Max Scherzer. 1 on the dot for Shohei Ohtani. Those 2 and Hubble really could be enough to be a legitimate playoff threat for the Angels. If Cy Young can turn it around and supply any kind of value, if he is a 4th starter, then that's a really, really solid piece. And I think that J.R. Richard, despite some of the peripherals not looking great, I think that he's as solid of a 4 or 5 as we've got in the Legends League. So I'm bullish on this rotation in the long haul. 10.9 Ks per 9 for Scherzer is fantastic. Not any really troubling walk numbers, especially from the bullpen. They're really keeping those walks down. That is fantastic. FIP numbers, Max Scherzer with a 2.39 FIP suggests that he is headed for better days. And Cy Young's FIP is right there with his ERA, suggesting that those numbers are pretty accurate so far. So lots to worry about for Cy Young. J.R. Richard may be in for some regression in the wrong direction with his FIP almost a full point north of his ERA. Okay, that's the Angels. Moving on to the A's, the most tinkery of all of the rosters in the Legends League so far, but they seem to have finally found their way to a hot streak. The keys for the Athletics that I identified at the beginning of the season. Number 1 is that the Reggie Jackson / Al Simmons platoon can take pressure off of Campanella as needing to be a big run producer in the middle of that order. So there's some really solid bats in the middle of this lineup, especially with Honus Wagner, Jeff Bagwell, Stan Musial. Probably not too worried about those guys, even if they're underperforming. You figure they're going to turn it around. Honus Wagner was off to an atrocious start, but he's been red hot of late. Bagwell's been struggling, but he's hit a couple jacks recently. You don't worry about those guys. But then once you get past that kind of core of the lineup, I start to run into some questions about not there being good hitters, but there being a really good run producer outside of those 3. Roy Campanella seems to fit that bill, but I was worried about his ability, as I am with all catchers, to maintain the stamina and the energy it takes to really be punishing the ball day in and day out. So I had identified this platoon of Reggie Jackson and Al Simmons to be the thing that takes the pressure off of Campanella. You'll notice that Al Simmons isn't on this roster because he has already been traded, and Reggie Jackson hasn't been living up. He's only got 9 RBIs. So maybe something to worry about there, seeing if there's another big run producer that can emerge from this lineup. The second key for the Athletics I identified at the beginning of the season was that the defense doesn't hurt the low strikeout pitchers. So there's some really top-notch defenders on this team, Honus Wagner and Matt Chapman specifically. But Paul Molitor's been playing out of position, playing second base. He does have that as a secondary position, but it's not his primary. And he's not the best defender. You can kind of hide a guy at the Keystone, but not entirely. And then Bagwell isn't a great defender at first. Musial's not a great defender in left. Cool Papa Bell is a great defender in center, though he's a liability to get run on without having too strong of an arm. And then Reggie, though, we've seen him make some absolutely spectacular web gem diving plays in right, he doesn't really have the speed or the fielding stats to be a threat out there. So we'll have a look if there's any indication that the defense has been hurting their low strikeout rotation. And then my third key was that one of Delgado, Allen, and Molitor becomes an all-star. So we will look. Has Allen already been traded or dropped? Yep, that's true. So we're just looking to see if Delgado or Molitor can step up and be an all-star. Alrighty. So it is Musial and Wagner leading the way in the home run department, which I think is even a little surprising. I expected Bagwell to be right there, or a Delgado or Reggie Jackson, but they only have 3 apiece, though I know that they have been working on platoons, so they don't have as much opportunity. Campanella with 5 jacks is encouraging. Bagwell only having 4. I really think that that's something that is going to turn around. Honus Wagner has touched the plate 27 times. He's popped around the lineup a bit, hitting at the top of the lineup, hitting in the cleanup spot where he did. I believe that's what the A's manager told me, is that Wagner actually hit cleanup when he played, which is really surprising to me for a guy who was such a high average hitter in his day. And looking at the RBI totals, Stan Musial is really the big run producer. Honus Wagner right behind him with 29 and 26 RBIs. And then it's a pretty big fall off. Harry Heilman coming in third on the team with 19 RBIs, but he did most of that with his previous team. This is a recent acquisition by the Athletics, so don't trust these stats too much. I believe he was playing with the Rangers, where he was absolutely on fire for the beginning of the season. So I wonder how many of those RBIs came before his tenure in Oakland. And then behind that, there you've got Roy Campanella being the third highest RBI guy on this team. And that's kind of what my worry was. Here's Campanella with an icicle. I assume he's going to be a little tired. Yep, he's got -1s across the board, probably because he's tired. Taking that main catching duty with Wilson Ramos there as a solid backup for him. This is another recent acquisition who got most of his offensive production done in his stint with the Mets. So still waiting for that other run producer to show up. Jeff Bagwell having 14 RBIs in 145 at-bats ain't going to cut it, and that's really, really something to keep an eye on for the Athletics as we move forward. 8 steals from Cool Papa Bell paces the team. Paul Molitor checking in with 7 steals. All right, get some. Honus Wagner's only got 5. You expect him to step up the base running aggressiveness a bit with those good stats. This team is definitely going to run on you. Will be interesting to see the caught stealing numbers. On to our rate stats, looking at OBP, and man, can this lineup get on base. I'm just going to go straight down the list. 345, 323, 351, 366, 326. Campanella only at 275. Outside of his run production, he's kind of been a disappointment, especially for a guy who was really, really hot to start the season and looked like one of those guys who was a terror every time he came to the plate. Heilman on base at 414. Chapman only on base at 293. I know he's been in and out of the lineup, especially since recently acquired John Beckwith came to the team when he was on fire, but he has cooled off to become an icicle since then. Wow, he's triple slashing 214, 274, 446 at this point. Still slugging quite a lot, but a lot of that came really early. Carlos Delgado with a 400 on-base percentage. He's really a benefactor of his side of the platoon. And Reggie Jackson, triple slash of 162, 260, 368 is certainly worrisome, especially when you're not getting much value out of his glove. Dave Concepcion has been getting a good amount of platoon work as well. 361 on base for him. The slugging numbers are also pretty good. The OPSs are coming back up to something respectable, but this is a lineup who had a really, really big dry streak in the middle of April. Campanella was only hot in spring training. Oh, maybe that's where my bias is coming from. Maybe he hasn't been too good this season. That is worrisome, but his defense is so good that you don't worry too much. A good number of walks up and down the lineup, though nobody is really stepping out as a super elite walk bat, especially when you've got so many strikeouts coming up and down this lineup. Those are really the rally killers that can prevent a high on-base team from actually turning into a high run production team. Some good extra base hit total numbers. Honus Wagner with 6 triples, which is as many as doubles. So he's got 8 home runs, 6 doubles, 6 triples. That's wild. What's his OPS? He's slugging 591 for a 942 OPS. That's pretty incredible, and certainly deserving of his first round pick selection. 12 doubles from Bagwell suggests that the power is there, just hasn't converted into home runs yet. 10 doubles from Musial, and 11 from Chapman. So even though he's not getting on base, he is punishing the ball. So he might be a little bit better in a run producer role, trying to put him right behind some of those guys who are getting on base, even though he's not going to be getting on base too much himself. Not too much of a grounded into double play problem. Lots of sacrifice hits from this roster. That's really interesting. We haven't seen that many sack fly and sack hit numbers from these other rosters that we've been looking at. A lot of hit by pitches, too. 3 for Musial, 2 for Bagwell, 2 for Wagner, 2 for Bell. Pretty surprising. 3 intentional walks for Harry Heilman, but I believe that was mostly from his time with Texas. And to the caught stealing numbers, we've got Wagner with 3, Bagwell with 2, Campanella with 3, because, say it with me, catchers love to run in the Legends League. Concepcion, Jackson, Delgado, and Bell each caught once on the year, so between a lot of strikeouts and running into outs on the base paths, that might contribute a lot to the A's sputtering offense up until recently when they've really turned it on. Looking at the fielding numbers here, hey, there's one of the keys. The defense has not hurt the low-K pitchers. Other than John Beckwith, who I believe he had 2 errors in 1 game and then quickly was relegated to a DH role, and a platoon DH role at that. We've seen 2 errors from Honus Wagner, but he's been out there for 322 innings, so that's not too worrisome. Musial and Molitor each committing 1. This defense is playing really well. And then we've got 5 guys with wins above replacement already clearing 1, with Honus Wagner already up at 1.7. That's really, really solid from this roster. Yeah, would like to see the walk and strikeout numbers start to trend in a better direction for this team. But there's no real aberrations here, I guess, other than Matt Chapman striking out 32% of the time and Reggie Jackson striking out 31% of the time. Not exactly numbers to write home about. Cool Papa Bell ISO of 0.95, but I believe his on base is good enough that it's fine. Yeah, he's on base at a 366 clip. So for a leadoff hitter, you live with that. Here's some more of the peripherals that I don't know what they mean. Stan Musial with that range factor above 2 in left field, a 2.48 in center for Cool Papa Bell. I think that's the best range factor I've seen out of a center fielder so far, so that would definitely suggest that his high reaction, fielding, and speed stats are all contributing to him being a really, really solid defensive center fielder. The lefty-righty platoon splits here for the A's. Roy Campanella really struggling against righties to the tune of a 186 average. Heilman is crushing righties, hitting 400. Matt Chapman struggling to a 155. Carlos Delgado in his platoon is hitting 358 against right-handed pitchers, so he's really thriving in his platoon. Nothing too worrisome otherwise. Molitor with that 230 against righties is not super encouraging. Against lefties, we see Musial, Bell, Molitor, and Chapman are all raking. Matt Chapman, 389 average versus lefties. It's only 36 at-bats, but that's starting to get towards a sample that you actually start to pay attention to. 3 of Musial's home runs have come against lefties in only 45 at-bats, so he's really doing good against southpaws. Bagwell struggling to get it going against lefties, hitting 234. Heilman, there's one of the biggest platoon differences we've seen so far. 400 against righties, 152 against lefties. Even though these aren't the biggest samples in the world, a disparity that large, I open my eyes and have a look at that. Similarly, Carlos Delgado, 167 against lefties, 358 against righties. That just encourages that platoon even further. And Reggie Jackson just can't get it going against anybody. That's a bummer. Well, it's not October. Can you expect Mr. October to get it going until it's October? Here's our home road splits. Jeff Bagwell hitting 188 at home. I still don't put too much stock into home road splits. Don't know how much this game actually has park factors being involved, though Jeff Bagwell does apparently love the road. He's hitting 333 on the road and sucking at home. And a look at the opportunities with runners in scoring position. Here's the big downside of Jeff Bagwell so far. 52 at-bats with runners in scoring position, which paces the team. He's way ahead of everybody else. The next closest is Heilman, and again, he's a recent pickup, so I don't even count him. The next highest on the roster is Musial with 38. So Bagwell has had, quick math, 14 more at-bats with runners in scoring position than anybody else on this roster for the whole season. And he's hitting 173 in those chances. That just can't happen. That's wild. On the other hand, you've got Musial and Wagner hitting over 300 in their opportunities to drive runs in. Paul Molitor also hitting 103 in his 29 at-bats with runners in scoring position. Campanella under the Mendoza line with the chance to bop in runs. Matt Chapman hitting 273 with runners in scoring position, which is higher than his season average of 234 and would explain his 15 RBI. So there's another argument for him taking a more of a run producer role. And Carlos Delgado is really one of the shining bright spots for this lineup, and he could be on his way to an all-star appearance if it weren't for such a crowded Legends League field and the fact that he's probably not going to accrue enough bulk to get considered in the same way that a lot of these other guys are. If you could take Delgado's production and slap it onto Bagwell, all of a sudden this lineup would be terrifying. Over to the men on the mound. Down here at the bottom, we've got Troy Percival and Randy Jones as the two guys not getting much work, a little over 4 innings each, and just rough ERAs. Troy Percival has been rough so far. 15.43 ERA with a 2.36 WHIP. Only struck out 3. Thank goodness he's only pitched 4.2 innings and has only lost 1 game, because that is terrible. Randy Jones is a new pickup, so I don't want to read too much into his work so far. John Franco has looked great as the closer so far. He has 8 saves. Oh, Greg Minton also recently picked up, so don't read too much into Minton's stats yet. Franco, though, 8.1 innings pitched, 8 saves, only 1 walk, only 4 Ks, but with results like this, who cares? 1.08 ERA, 0.84 WHIP. Doesn't look like any blown saves. Nope. Troy Percival takes care of the blowing saves. He has 2 of those, and yet has 4 holds, because again, holds is the stupidest stat in baseball. I don't understand holds, and I don't understand why we use them in PFK, but that's a topic for another day. Phil Niekro leading the way with 55 innings pitched. When you're throwing that knuckleball, you can just throw until the cows come home, right? Bill Foster's got 50 innings. Vida Blue with 49 and a third. Really good ERA numbers from Foster and Niekro, 3.44 and 3.24 for Niekro and Foster in that order. Chief Bender, who was on a cold streak, he's got his ERA down to 3.49. He's looking real good with a 4-2 record. Brett Saberhagen coming in with a 4-2 as well in his 48 innings. Bit of a walk problem for Vida Blue so far. He's been pitching pretty well. A 4.74 ERA isn't terrifying, but it's not great. But 23 walks to 47 strikeouts in 49.1 innings is a little bit worrisome. The strikeout numbers are good, but when you're walking that many guys, yeah, I guess Bill Foster's turning a really similar profile into better results. So I wonder what's going on there. Their ERA separated by 1.5. Is there a clutch disparity here? Hey, look at that. Bill Foster with his 90 clutch seems to be getting out of jams where he's walking guys, putting them on base, whereas Vida Blue with his 75 clutch rating is getting a couple guys walked, and then all of a sudden there's big innings coming his way, which would explain a lot of what's going on there. Then all of a sudden you look at Niekro, who's only walked 8 guys, struck out 46 in his 55 innings pitched. He is really a deserving ace for this squad. Jose Alvarado with a 0.79 ERA. He's not a super recent pickup, but he didn't start the season with the squad, I don't think. 0.97 WHIP is also pretty nice. Greg Minton is definitely encouraging as a new addition to this bullpen. Kirby Yates has been a bit of a roller coaster. He struck out 28 in 19 innings pitched, which is amazing. But a 5.12 ERA and a 1.5 WHIP is not what you want to see out of a guy who's being trusted with a lot of high leverage situations. Dan Herron was acquired from the Brewers in our first trade of the Legends League season. So he went from a starting role for the Brewers into a bullpen role with the A's. I don't want to read too much into his stats because he doesn't have much of a sample in his new role. Looking at the quality starts to starts, we've got Foster and Niekro both turning in 6 quality starts in their 8. Oh, Alvarado was a highest draft pick. Never mind. Well, he is certainly living up to that draft pick then. That is fantastic. Vida Blue and Chief Bender turning in quality starts in exactly half of their appearances. And then how about Brett Saberhagen? 6 quality starts out of 7 starts. That is really, really solid, giving his team a chance to win every time he takes the bump. That's fantastic. Three complete games from the starting rotation, one of them coming from Dan Herron, who again is now occupying a bullpen slot. Okay, home run problem. Bill Foster only allowing 3 home runs so far. Wow. His home run per 9 stat is 86, so that could be a true skill thing, but that might regress in the wrong direction. Might see a bit more of a bump in his ERA because of that. But on the other side, you've got Vida Blue and Phil Niekro allowing 8 each. But with a knuckleballer and a guy with low clutch and low home run per 9 stat, you would expect those numbers to be high. Saberhagen has allowed 7 home runs in his work, but he has kept his ERA down to a 3.56, which is interesting. What's his clutch? 86. So maybe more of those have been solo shots. Bunch of wild pitches from this roster. I wonder if that's a blocking issue from Campanella or if these guys are just wild. Over 1 WAR from Niekro and Foster already. Really solid 1-2 for this rotation. 13 Ks per 9 from Kirby Yates and a 2.79 walks per 9 is leading. Oh, but he's still got a FIP of 4.45. That is lower than his ERA. It's just the Kirby Yates roller coaster. I really don't know what to read from his stats. Just wild. See here, FIP numbers seem to be pretty in line with ERAs here. Maybe Brett Saberhagen would be in line for some regression in the wrong direction. Kirby Yates could maybe see his ERA come down. Alvarado might be having performance a little bit better than his skill. And John Franco with an FIP of 2.4 outpacing his ERA of 1.08. We might see Franco's dominance wane a little bit if that FIP discrepancy is to be trusted. Alrighty, that's it for the A's. Going on to their heated rival, the Seattle Mariners. We have seen, I believe it's every single game of the Mariners and A's. They've played 2 series so far this season. I think we've seen all of them on the stream, and they've all been nail-biters and just fantastic games. I love this rivalry. Sorry, taking a chance to drink some coffee here. The keys to a legendary season for the Mariners that I identified at the beginning of the season. Number 1 is that Doc Gooden is good enough. I don't think he has been so far, even though he's been given the ace role. So he should be getting that morale bump from feeling all good about himself. Feeling it in his jellies. I just watched the Detective Pikachu movie recently, so I've been feeling it in my jellies. That's actually a surprisingly good movie. The second key for the Mariners was that Edgar Martinez is actually the linchpin of this lineup. There's so many guys who have platoon splits, exemplified by their first overall pick, Ken Griffey Jr., who has that big platoon disadvantage against lefties. So there's some vulnerabilities to this lineup. But if Edgar could be the linchpin in the middle that just crushes no matter what's going on, then this lineup was going to work out. Then the third key for the Mariners is that for the pitching staff, the strikeouts cover for a potentially troublesome defense. We'll have a look at all that as we go through. The bench guys for the Mariners, we'll have to pay a little bit more attention to them than we do for some of these other teams because, I guess Lazari's only gotten 22 at-bats, even though we've seen him in a couple of these streamed games. Manny Sanguillen has seemed to get in more than 43 at-bats, but he's not been performing that well. But Ken Griffey Sr. has been promoted to a full-time role in this Mariners offense after he's just been crushing it off the bench. He's now up to 62 at-bats, still hitting .403, so we'll have to check in with him as we go through the stats. But here are the starters. Edgar pacing the team by a long shot with 153 at-bats. The Mariners have been doing a lot with platoons and moving people around, hitting some guys at the top of the lineup versus lefties, bottom of the lineup versus righties. And I think that shows in a more even distribution of at-bats compared to a lot of other teams that have a few guys with a ton of at-bats and then the rest of the team lower, right? Nobody's eclipsed 10 home runs on this squad. Griffey has 9. Edgar's got 7. Acuna's got 7. And I know that 4 of those have come against the A's, maybe 5. So it's possible that Acuna has only hit 2 home runs against any team not named the Athletics, which is truly hilarious. Billy Williams, another guy who was a spring training hero and kept that hot streak going into the season, has really fallen off to the point where he lost his role to Griffey Sr. Looking at the run production, Acuna's plated 21 times. Nobody really else standing out as a run scorer. Ken Griffey Jr. being the biggest run producer with 25 RBIs. Yeah, again, you'd like to see that being Edgar Martinez. Now, the Mariners are winning, so you don't have to worry too much about any of these things, but they're not winning in the way that at least I predicted them to at the beginning of the season. But, you take what you can get, and if Christy Mathewson is just going to put the team on his back, then Christy Mathewson is going to put the team on his back. 12 RBIs from Rendon is way too low. Acuna with 14 RBIs, so he's only driven in 7 runs that weren't himself, which is a little bit worrisome for a guy that a lot is being relied on in this lineup. Todd Helton with 19 RBIs, you'd like to see that be higher. Same for Sandberg with 16. 20 for Rosen. I'm going to be interested to check out the runners in scoring position numbers for this squad. Here's an interesting one. Griffey Sr. has already plated 14 runs in his 62 at-bats. Compare that to 14 runs for the 111 at-bats for Helton, or like 18 runs for Griffey Jr. and Rendon in 130 at-bats. So Griffey Sr. not only getting on base, but using those wheels to actually get around and score a lot. I do think that is a skill and not entirely context. Acuna with 4 steals, pretty sweet. Griffey Jr. with 3. This team doesn't run a ton, except for Griffey Sr. 7 steals. Why not? That's one of the higher steal rates we've seen from anybody, especially with as low of playing time as he's gotten. Looking at on-base percentage, Ken Griffey Jr. up there with a .345 on base, even with that platoon disadvantage. That would be an argument to me that he deserves to be in his third in the lineup spot against both sides of the platoon, not just because it makes you feel good in your jellies, but because he's actually stepping up and doesn't seem to be struggling too much on one side of the platoon. That OPS staying above 900. How about Al Rosen hitting 327 and his OPS over 1,000 in 101 at-bats? That's quite a surprising performance from the third baseman that I thought would be out competed by Anthony Rendon for that hot corner spot. Looking at more on-base numbers here, Bill Dickey with a .211 on-base percentage is unacceptable. Manny Sanguillen with 304 in his 43 at-bats might be arguing for more playing time. Nobody else really emerging as an on-base threat. I guess Acuna's 373 is surprisingly high. Billy Williams with that 347 shows that he's drawing his walks and not striking out too much. Might be fighting to get back into that starting lineup before long. Ken Griffey Jr. limiting the strikeouts compared to his walks, which is really something that you would be worried about with Griffey. 12 walks to 22 Ks, so that is encouraging. You would expect him to strike out in bunches, a lot more than that. When we had the Mariners GM on the pod, one of the things we were surprised by is the lack of doubles from this roster, but it looks like that's turned around a bit. Acuna has 11, Rendon has 9, Griffey's Jr. and Sr. Checking in with 6 and 5 doubles. Edgar's got 6, Sandberg's got 6, Helton's got 5, Williams got 5, Rosen's got 6, Lindor's got 6. So they're clubbing their extra base hits. Griffey Jr. also adding 2 triples. Some not terrible, not great caught stealing numbers from this roster. Griffey Sr. only caught once against his 7 successful steals. Al Rosen's been caught 4 times. That's really rough. Acuna's been caught twice. He's been running a lot. Al Rosen has been caught all 4 times he's tried to steal. I wish there was a way to just put the red light on somebody, because that's real bad. Looking at the defense, got 2 errors from Rhino, 1 from Sandberg and Acuna, 1 from Williams, 3 from Rosen. Boy, outside of his bat, Rosen's been kind of hurting you. Lindor's got 2 errors. So yeah, looks like this is indeed a potentially troublesome defense. Looks like they could be a little bit leaky, especially at some key positions. Of course, Griffey Jr. being an absolute stalwart in center field. But outside of that, some potential liability there. We'll see if the pitching staff is striking out the world to make up for that. Because if you just strike them out, you don't got to make a play. Griffey, Rendon, and Acuna each with over 1 WAR. Ryan Sandberg right on the door, as is Griffey Sr. .9 WAR in 62 at-bats. Good on the Mariners for promoting him into a starting lineup spot. Lots of strikeouts from this roster, not as many walks. They're really going to have to get it done by making contact. I don't see that turning around anytime soon. Though, boy, Edgar, look at that discipline. Only 10.5% strikeout rate. 6.4% walks. He's going to put the bat on the ball more often than not, but he's certainly not striking out. That's cool. Some solid ISO numbers, nothing too gaudy. Bill Dickey really, really struggling. Don't like to see that from a guy who's in the lineup most days. Heading to the platoons. Griffey Jr. hitting 303 against righties. That's what you'd expect. Al Rosen 325 against right-handers. Lindor 147 against righties. What's he hitting against lefties? 346. Okay, so Lindor might be a solid platoon candidate. Griffey Sr. hitting 419 against righties, 387 against lefties. He's just crushing all over the place. He'll head for a cold streak eventually, but for now, you ride it until it's into the ground, right? Having a look at lefties. Edgar Martinez really struggling against left-handed pitching, which is not something that you would expect from a righty. He's hitting 194 against lefties, only 36 at bats though. So if that comes against like 3 really good ace lefties, which a lot of the lefties that are in this league are like serious aces, then that would explain it. But you got Rhino hitting 333 against lefties. That's really encouraging. 206 for Griffey against lefties. I wish we had walk numbers versus left and righties because again, you know, Griffey's keeping that on base percentage high. So I don't know that he hurts you all that much just because there's a lefty in the lineup, though that 206 is worrisome, especially when you got Acuna hitting 343 and Rendon at 314 and Billy Williams at 333, Rosen at 333, Lindor at 346, Griffey Sr. 387. A lot of people that can step in there and crush against lefties. And the Mariners have been doing a lot of platooning to make that happen. Home and away splits. Take what you want from them. I don't read anything into them. And the runners in scoring position situations, Anthony Rendon has crapped the bed. 0.61 batting average in 33 attempts with runners in scoring position. Yikes. Somehow he still has 12 RBI, though. So, go figure. Griffey only 229 with runners in scoring position. And this is the one that just kills me. 225 for Edgar in 40 at-bats with runners in scoring position. This is just not the Edgar Martinez profile. This is one of the most clutch hitters in the history of the game. He's got 97 clutch. He's got great discipline and vision, great contact stats. I expect that to turn around. He will not be hitting 225 with runners in scoring position by the time we hit the All-Star break, which means that this Mariners offense should turn into something that's even more formidable than the one that has been flirting with first place in the division. And here we have Al Rosen, who really is emerging as one of the biggest surprises for the Mariners to me. He has had 24 at-bats with runners in scoring position, and he's put up a .417 batting average. Not bad. Go get him. For a guy with this much positional eligibility, that's really, really impressive numbers. So as long as he can stop running into outs on the base paths. Griffey Sr. hitting 125. Any chance I can see the A's minor leagues real quick? No. Those aren't your players. I'm not interested in looking at minor leagues. Thank you for asking, but I've got hours and hours of this to do. I'm not trying to add more stuff that doesn't actually matter to anybody. Looking at the pitchers for the Mariners, again, the key was that they are striking out enough people so that the defense is not too much of a liability. Only a couple guys not getting too much work. Gary Lavelle, who is a new acquisition, only 2 1/3 innings, not going to look into that. Willie Hernandez, 6.1 innings pitched to a 4.26 ERA and a 2.05 WHIP. Chapman and Lee Smith are the setup and closer for this squad. Chapman has yet to allow a run. I know he had the closer's role, I believe, in spring training, and the Mariners made a move to put him in the setup, and that has paid dividends so far. He has collected 1 save for the M's. And Lee Smith, I believe, is leading the voting for AL closer for the All-Star game. So he's been really solid. 13 innings, 11 saves. He does have 1 loss and a 2.03 ERA and a .75 WHIP. How about Christy Mathewson? 59.2 innings. That's got to be up there. If not the league lead, then really close to it. 4-2 record, 2.11 ERA, 0.92 WHIP. Striking out a ton. 53 strikeouts in almost 60 innings. It's not quite a batter per inning, but when you're only walking 10 in that time, oh man, that's impressive. Then you got Pedro, who's been hot and cold. He's either been really dominant or has been a victim of the big inning. Is that a clutch thing? It is not a clutch thing. That's really odd. He only has 12 walks in 50 innings. He has 58 Ks in those 50 innings, and yet he's 3-4. I'm curious what the kryptonite has been for Pedro. Very interesting. Guidry and Bucky have not done as good of a job of limiting the walks, nor have they been striking out the world. And then Doc Gooden, 6.2 ERA, 1.65 whip. He's 0-4, has thrown 40 innings, struck out 38, walked 15. Just not what you would expect from a guy with this profile. That's gonna be a guy to watch. I know that the Mariners have thought about demoting him from that ace role, especially when you've got other guys dominating so much. You want to reward them with that morale boost. But yeah, Gooden not good enough so far. Over here looking at the ERAs. Solid ERAs from the starting rotation outside of Gooden. The bullpen has been really solid. Byung-Hyun Kim continues to be great after his stellar spring. 3.14 ERA, 1.19 whip. Does he have only 1 win, no losses? He's only walked 4 and struck out 12. As we said, Lee Smith just pitching incredibly. Mike Marshall, a .77 ERA, .77 whip in 11.2 innings out of middle relief is really solid. Rod Beck, he started the season on the Giants and got blown up a couple times real early, causing the Giants to cut bait quickly. But the Mariners picked him up, and he's been solid for them. His ERA is already down to 3.72. His whip sitting at 1.14. This could be a really, really solid waiver get for the M's. Looking at those quality starts numbers, 6 for Christie, 4 for Pedro, 5 for Guidry, 5 for Walters, and 3 for Gooden. So all of these starters are giving the team a chance to win, especially Mathewson. Like I said, he seems to be putting this team on his back. Bucky Walters, 5 quality starts out of 7 starts. That's really solid too. So very admirable performance from the starting rotation. Pedro did throw 1 shutout. So yeah, he might be a guy who's just fire and ice. If he's on, he's as good as anybody in the game, but you're just kind of rolling the dice with him and seeing if it's coming up a 6 or a 1 that day. Because that's what dice have. They only have 2 sides, right? A 6 and a 1. Yeah, that's how that works. Nobody has blown more than 1 save, though 4 different guys have blown a save. The Rod Beck one might be from the Giants, though don't know how much to read into that. Got 8 holds from Chapman in his 7 innings. That's pretty impressive. 5 holds for Beck, 1 for Marshall, 6 for Kim. Great bullpen performance in Seattle. Dwight Gooden, his big problem has been the home run. Looks like the same for Pedro and Guidry, too. 12 home runs in 40 innings for Gooden. Yikes. And that home run per 9 stat is low, especially combined with the walk totals. That's just rough. I wonder if he's going to see a demotion to that long relief spot before long, or if maybe somebody who believes in him is going to come in and make a trade. I think that we're still early enough in the season that some of these guys who haven't turned it around yet might be some buy low candidates that where the person selling them might still be able to recoup some value since it's still early enough in the season. I could totally see Doc Gooden turning this around and pitching like a 99 by the time we hit the All-Star break, but it might be a couple more weeks until he shakes off the rust and gets it going. Christy Mathewson racking up a 1.3 WAR already. Ks per 9 over 10 from Pedro, Lee Smith, and Chapman. Pretty fantastic. FIP numbers, a 3.27 from Christy Mathewson. That suggests that his 2.11 ERA might be a bit low, but I don't know. He has looked dominant. I don't expect him to start sucking anytime soon. Pedro's FIP is lower than his ERA, suggesting that his talent is a little bit better than the results so far. Guidry and Bucky are suggested that they might regress in the wrong direction, and then Doc Gooden's FIP is right there with his ERA, suggesting that it has been as bad as it has seemed. Nothing too alarming from the bullpen in that department. And then we'll get a quick look at the cupcakes. Though the Rangers aren't the cupcake, they're the damn division leader. Not gonna linger too much on this, just gonna flip through real quick. 6 quality starts from Tommy Bridges out of his 7 starts is really good. C.J. Wilson has been what the hell. 41 innings, 46 Ks, 2.59 ERA, .96 WHIP, 4-1 record. And yet he's only thrown 2 quality starts, and one of those was a shutout. Really weird season for C.J. Wilson, especially when you look at that stat profile of an 89 overall who has no individual attribute over an 80, not even hitting 80, and yet he's outperforming players like Doc Gooden. That's baseball, though. That is baseball, though. Yeah, C.J. Wilson, 1.5 win above replacement, and we're in the first week of May. And his FIP is even suggesting that he could be better. One of the many reasons to love this sport, you really can't predict it, and it's so cool that this game does a good job of actually reflecting that, you know? As much as we like to think that we have it all figured out with stats and scouting and everything, baseball is a sport that just surprises you every single time. Looks like Frank Howard is living up to his nickname. I believe they called him Frank Home Run Howard. So 10 home runs on the season is great. How about Tex with 10 home runs? Love to see that. Only a 237 average, but I'll keep him in that lineup if he keeps clubbing dongs. Bingo DeMoss with 6 steals. This Rangers team, if you remember back at the beginning of the season, we started off all these cupcakes as with a theme. Like the Yankees was post-war era players, and the Boston Red Sox was really old-timey guys from the turn of the century. The Rangers team was war heroes. This is mostly a team of guys who went off and fought in a war and then came back and played baseball. On the other hand, you have the Cubs being guys that fought during wartime but never actually served in the military. So it's really fun on a couple levels to see the Rangers totally crushing and leading the NL West, even though it's such a competitive division, because these guys are true red, white, and blue American heroes, damn it. And they deserve it. And then looking at... Oh, no, we already looked at the pitchers. So let's look at the Astros. Fittingly, the Astros were given the theme of cheaters at the beginning of the season. That has changed a lot. Since I started off with those themes, we realized quickly that there needed to be a lot of rebalancing of these cupcake squads so that they would be competitive across the league. Somehow that didn't work out for the Rockies, as they still have only 4 wins as we're in the first month of May, or first week of May. Hey, Billy Hamilton, 9 steals. And that's the old Billy Hamilton. Cool. That's fun. Go get him. But as the themes didn't end up playing out the way that we hoped they would in terms of fairness league-wide, I ended up having to rebalance a lot, and the Astros were one of the teams that got rebalanced a ton. But there's still a lot of guys on here who were, guys who played with cork bats, guys who were spitballers or would rub pine tar on the ball before they threw, before that kind of stuff became illegal. So there's just some fun names to look into their background on this squad, and boy, they're just sucking on offense. Again, not trying to linger too long on these cupcake squads. The commissioner's boys. A couple really talented pitchers on this squad, though. 2 guys with ERAs under 3, which at this point in the season is really impressive. Over 4 innings, playing against Hall of Fame lineups, and your WHIP is 1.06. Okay, go get some, Burley Grimes. Burley Grimes. What a baseball name. Alrighty, I'm going to shut it down again for a little bit. I'm having some sinus allergy issues, so I'm starting to get a bit of a sore throat from all this talking. But I will be back later today with the other half of our divisional previews. See you then.